Hello, hello. So the title says New Website Regarding My Grievance with Seton Hall. And it's still in the construction phases, but the way it is laid out, we have on the main page the dismissal letter. And here's the dismissal letter here. It's actually the initial letter that they said, my status in the program was at risk due to violations, certain violations. So then we have at the bottom interactive transcript. And I'm setting it up where you can click on different parts of the transcript and it will bring you to um, information related to that situation. So here it's saying a pattern of inappropriate and unwelcome communications between yourself, learning team members, so myself and learning team members. This is the screen recording of the group chat between me and the learning team members. Hi, everyone. Hi, Joya. Hi. It's my understanding we reply to 5. I was waiting until Monday to see if you all replied because since 6102 responses are optional for the introduction, Professor M said we don't have to wait to Monday through Wednesday to respond to posts, but I can't recall if she said responses on the first discussion would be optional. Can someone link the Teams link? Is anyone awake to talk about a phobia? Are we supposed to be putting our discussion post through the TDs, or is that intended for something else? Is anyone available Wednesday to be my client as part of a mock session? Is anyone having difficulty with the sound in the mesoskill rapport video? It sounds like you have some questions about the difference between reflexive content versus reflection of feeling. Is that about right? I was able to get the high school girl in addition to the second grader. Like others have said, Chrome works, but it's not supported by Safari. Can we change our attempts? I made multiple recordings, and the one I uploaded, I'm looking at a notepad to start the session. The website exists. You can go through them. Um, the other one is faculty. These are shorter videos. So now we have the faculty directory. These are all my professors. Some of them I had text communications with Mayer, Veliz, Conti, and that's it. These three I did not have text communications with. So if I go to view evidence for Professor Mayer, that's not Professor Mayer, by the way, it brings us to this screen recording. I asked her about a situation where I had reached out to Saybrook. So I had completed 17 courses, 51 credits at Saybrook. I was dismissed from the program. I applied to Seton Hall. I was accepted into Seton Hall. And during my first semester, I had reached out to Saybrook, and they said they would be open to having me return, and that they, would assist with letters of recommendation and whatnot. And but I was committed to Seton Hall, where I wanted to continue my education there, and so I asked her for some advice on this. Then I have some questions about the Who I Am paper, and she dock points for um, things related to my experience in the field. So I worked at a group home, and I told a story about how I employed some core conditions, I guess, and some proxemics, which are basically body posture, making the client feel comfortable by, um, giving them. We were walking side by side, so we were like shoulder to shoulder, um, but there was enough space between us, and typically in a therapy session, you might have your stance where your feet are flat on the ground. You're situated at like a 45-degree angle, and open shoulders, slightly leaning forward, and um, these things are intended to make the client feel heard. I expressed during our residency, um, with the emergence of telehealth, it has kind of changed some of the standards of, what is socially appropriate, eye contact and stuff. And I mentioned that, there are some devices that have you focus at certain parts of the screen. I remember that Philip DeFranco, he had like his camera set up where it's look at the camera, don't look at the screen or something, to make it look like he's engaging in eye contact with the audience or something. I think it was him. And I expressed that, this is a unique opportunity where we can kind of change some of the rules here, because you don't need to have your eyes fixated on the individual. You can do what you want to feel comfortable. I felt that in one of my exchanges with Ethiopia Jackson at Saybrook, that she was actually trying to check my eyes. I had my camera at the top of my monitor, and it was pointing kind of down at me, and I have a hat on, and that's not to mask anything other than to, um, it's to, that's how I looked best, I guess, in the camera frame. I put on weight, and I was losing weight during that time, so I just liked my appearance from that angle. There are some videos where it's noticeable that I have the hat on, but I'm not trying to be evasive or anything. I always wear a hat. And, but, I said, like, it might not feel comfortable to just be staring at, in a certain way. And I also expressed um, my thoughts, or I stated my thoughts on attire. So growing up, I always wanted to have, like a suit to wear to work. I envisioned myself getting a $3,000 Armani suit. I look forward to this day. I went to Chaminade and I dressed in suit and tie, and I don't mind going out to like fancy restaurants and dressing up, when I can, fit into the clothes. When I'm overweight, I feel that, that attire actually looks sloppy. And so I had mentioned, like, now that I've grown older, I express some interest in wearing things that are more casual to make myself feel comfortable, because I don't want to be fixated on distractions. I don't want to be focused on distractions such as, my necktie being too tight, and, my pants being uncomfortable or something, things that are going to distract me from the conversation between myself and the client. And I don't, we had an example of like what a bad therapy session is, and it was like supposed to be the first therapy session that that individual had. So I don't know what that person's expectations were, but I'm sure if I were in that situation, I might not complain. Like having no expectations of what therapy might be, you don't really have like a standard to hold the therapist to. And I don't know if individuals nowadays hold, you know, therapists and stuff to an attire standard. But I've been to doctors and stuff that have worn jeans and, not the standard like suit and tie to work. Um, So there are some things like in that therapy session, like the therapist is picking her teeth with toothpicks, but she asks, like, do you mind? And, the client says, no, go ahead. So some of these might be employed by Gestalt therapy. Put the client on the proverbial hot seat. See how much walking over them you can do. I'm just going to disrespect and ignore my client. So anyway, then I have Professor Veliz here. Here's a text communication, and you're welcome to go to the site. It is now published. It is live. And Professor Conti. So here's the conversation with Professor Conti. And then we have administrators. And Robert Chen and Vice President Sarah Miller and Director James Wilson and Dr. Catherine Lee. These are not people associated with the program. Um, these two are Brian Crable and Dr. Jody Kolstad. So if you click on Brian Crable, it's actually not an active link because there was no text communication between me and Brian. Dr. Kolstad, though, she mentioned how like she was teaching a course. She wasn't listed as any professor in any of my courses. She's listed as the director of like the program, and so I have her text communication. So that's all I have right now. I wanted to get it live. Um, I will post things like feedback, and so I will post the feedback given by professors, and like it says that recently faculty shared generally positive feedback regarding your academic performance as part of coursework. And like that's what it should be. Like, I was invited to Kappa Delta Pi. My grades were, stellar, and now I contacted the ACA, the American Counseling Association. They said they don't get involved with student level stuff. They're involved in the professional community. So the ACA should almost be disregarded in this situation. As far as the student code of conduct, the policy against sexual misconduct, harassment, and retaliation, that's what I'm countering. That's my grievance with Seton Hall. I feel that their action by dismissing me using sexual misconduct as a vehicle for my dismissal, I feel is a form of sexual harassment because it's really unsubstantiated. There's nothing I did that is sexually inappropriate. I made no inappropriate sexual innuendos or advancements to faculty or staff or students, And the thing that they cite was an email where I said that patients might potentially have to disrobe, and that was supposed to be, the context is that it was in a medical setting. So when a patient goes to the doctor, guess what? They might have to. The whole thing is that I was saying I might have to have um, good bedside manner. I had to be sensitive to the needs of the client, um, because they might have to discuss something that's potentially embarrassing or intimate. You know, they might have to talk about being molested. They might have to show me part of their body where they were touched inappropriately. They might have to discuss, things that are outside of their comfort zone. And I have to be prepared to handle that information and do so in a way that doesn't alienate the client. And so I'm going to continue to work on this website. I had sent all the communications to the Department of Education. I had I've been asking ChatGTP, like, what do you think of this email that the Department of Education sent me? And they said, that's standard protocol. They're just telling you that, the process is still ongoing. It's still open for evaluation. I perhaps felt, Carmela, what are you doing? That potentially they suddenly said, like, someone could just Google you and find, like, information. Well, that's not the point. Um, Information might have been available about me on the internet at the time, but Seton Hall was privy to it, and they didn't seem to have a big deal about certain things. Um, They accepted me into their program. They let me pass the probation period. I didn't share any information with classmates, and it's disturbing that it was brought up by Dr. Kolstad that she said I shared a video link with my peers. You were discussing mental health, and so I didn't go out and Google all my classmates. I didn't go on the internet and be like, who's this? I wasn't scouring the internet looking for them. And so, what basically I feel like is potentially someone doing that to me. I had a video on YouTube related to a Facebook group, and I asked during the dismissal meeting, during the meeting for this mentioned in this letter in June 25th, 2025, did you guys look at my social media? Because there were three people who viewed a video about my Facebook, and that video, let's say I posted the video in 2023. I don't know when I posted it exactly. I could look up the statistics right now, but around the time of this letter, three people had viewed that video. So I asked them, and they said, no, we haven't looked up your social media. I expressed to the Department of Education, I felt that I find a little unsettling that, individuals were able to remove content related to them due to privacy concerns. And meanwhile, a lot of the stress in my life, is not having control of the content about me on the internet. Where I have a video where sheriffs came into my home against my will. I'm crying, I'm yelling for them to go away. I'm experiencing PTSD. I'm telling them I have an advanced care directive, don't touch me. And they proceed to enter my home against my wishes, bring me to the hospital where my advanced care directive is violated, my verbal and written directives are violated. And I tried to have that video taken down after somebody reposted it. And I was unsuccessful and that person, their video has a disclaimer where it's like this video has sensitive information related to suicide or something. And so I have, petitioned YouTube, Google to remove content related to me, and they haven't done so. And I was concerned that the ease that, the parties involved who removed the content from my YouTube page did so because they basically said, I feel threatened by this individual. And that's not the case. A lot of this documentation of my experiences is meant to protect me because I feel my safety. I feel fearful for my safety. And I'm hoping to, safeguard myself where I can, live stream something and demonstrate that, I'm not aggressive with these people. I'm not attempting to harm them or anything. They are disregarding my wishes. The person who is also assigned my case, um, you know, I sent my grievance in February of 2026 this year. It was received in March of this year, March of 2026, and the lawyer wasn't assigned to it until about, like May. And I handed her over every single communication I have with faculty, staff, students. There should be nothing in there that suggests um, inappropriate communications. Now, I don't know if one thing I was concerned about, if I go through with this investigation, do I open myself up to scrutiny over, well, this assignment, you know, wasn't in on time or something. So there, there's a Who I Am paper that was submitted on time. That's a big deal for me because my father talks about like every once a month, you I felt that people were betting against me that that paper wasn't going to get in. I submitted it. It's in. And it's not the best paper I've ever written, but it's very important to me. It's incredibly it's central to my identity. It's central to my vision of counseling, and it basically emphasizes the therapeutic alliance, and that's something that I've emphasized since I was a kid. It's mentioned in my email where I mentioned cultivating a sympathetic, compassionate caretaker, an individual who has a strong foundation of knowledge implied by my credentials, but also who projects warmth, fostering trust, making the client feel comfortable, and allowing them and facilitating communication. Where they feel comfortable, they trust me with these sensitive details about their life. And, that's something that I have cultivated since I was in high school. Based on my experiences in grade school, I started, shaping a certain identity where I intended on being sensitive to the needs of other people. So the therapeutic alliance is very important. Um, I don't like saying very important. I want to use a better phrasing. And I was considering making this my dissertation topic because previously I had expressed an interest in exploring chilling effects amongst treatment seeking individuals who might avoid seeking care for fear of being associated with mass murder and gun violence in the wake of Sandy Hook, where the media has depicted these gunmen as mentally ill. And, this is something that took shape around 2012, where there was a flurry of mass shootings, including Sandy Hook. I felt like there was a lot of them during the Obama administration, and I would go to the gym and I would watch the television and I would listen to them depict these individuals as mentally ill, and I was concerned for populations of people with fairly benign conditions such as depression or anxiety. And I had been training for a career in medicine where I had a bachelor's in biology, and I was, doing my due diligence for graduate and medical school and whatnot. And I took an interest in this, and so in 2015, I mentioned, like I hadn't been studying. I made a Facebook post where I said I wasn't studying for the MCAT. I said something like I was pacing in my downstairs, and I was thinking about something that I heard on the news, where Steve Lacy reported that Robin Williams had committed suicide, and I thought to myself, gee, if that person who is, synonymous with laughter and humor killed themselves, perhaps this is an opportune time to discuss the stigma of mental health, where we can make it more accessible, and um, make it less punishing for individuals. I have taken the position that seeking therapy is negative reinforcement. When you have cancer, if you have, a problem and you go to an oncologist, they say you have cancer. And but when you go to a therapist, a psychologist, and it potentially portrays that the issue is inherent with you, that it's not some sort of acquired disease. You have borderline personality disorder. Like, or you are. I meant to. You are schizophrenic. You are, um, blah blah blah, and it sends the message that the disorder you're diagnosing them with is a flaw within their personality, and there might be some negative reinforcement by going to the therapist. Um, by going to the doctor, by going to the oncologist, you have acknowledged that you have acquired a disease, but by going to a psychologist, you're basically saying that there's something wrong with you, and might not be the case for everyone, but I don't want, like, I want to be a grief counselor, trauma counselor. I don't wish to pathologize trauma. I hold a medical model approach where I don't hold individuals accountable for their issues. Someone who's been raped or had a loved one murdered or something, I'm not going to, pathologize their issues. They're hold them accountable for the grief that they're going through. Um, that doesn't mean that I can't engage in, diagnostic language. I mentioned, in my email that in a managed care setting, I will do what my employer says, and later I would read Murdoch, and Murdoch says, like Gestalt therapists don't diagnose and assess, but they see the value in the diagnostic language because it makes it easier to communicate with other people within the profession. So it's something that I'm capable of doing and willing to do. If a client says, "Can you diagnose me?" I'm willing to do that for them. Um, but it would, it'd have to be established in the therapeutic, the patient physician contract. And this stuff means a lot to me. It's it's a training myself to have a mindset to be non-judgmental, to be open-minded, tolerant, to be cynical, where I can see things from multiple. I'm using the word cynical because in a paralegal course, basically they use the term cynical as someone who's able to see something from multiple perspectives. So I thought, the example is, like, in a medical malpractice case, can you defend the client and can you defend the doctor? Can you defend both sides type thing. I don't like cynical because it sounds like someone who's pessimistic or critical of something. You think of like Stan Marsh, who was criticized, I guess, for being cynical in one episode, right? And I forget what he was doing, but maybe he was being like a film critic or something, or, um, but this is, this is how the term was used in a Hofstra paralegal course. Um, so I have made conscious efforts to shape my thought process in a certain way where I can be patient, tolerant with individuals, um, where I don't have a short fuse, and I can be open to you can convince me of your opinion. You know you can share with me your experience, and I will be open to to your side and whatnot. And I feel that with all the trauma I have experienced, maintaining that mindset is very difficult. And basically, it's like there must be some sort of effort and energy involved in maintaining that mindset. Basically, if someone were to open up to me and attempt to um, ask for support or something, I would have to say like, right now I can't help you because um, I need to resolve my own issues first, um, because it's affecting my judgment and my ability to see the world through your lens. And it's something that I've been capable of doing in the past, and that's where a lot of the panic is. The sky is falling. If I don't receive some TLC, some care and tending to my needs, um, it undoes a lifetime's worth of work, and I don't want to let go. I liked who I was, and I was watching How I Met Your Mother, and like, I've seen a few episodes in the past, but it's been kind of like on my, like I like to watch television when going to bed. So I thought, Friends is played out. I've seen Friends, like 50 times each episode. I used to come home from school every single day, put on the WB, to put on TBS and watch Friends. Then I purchased, the DVDs, and I eventually purchased the digital version, and I've watched the episodes on Nickelodeon stuff. I've seen so many episodes, so I decided, what's a show that I haven't really seen and I can tolerate. How I Met Your Mother, and there's an episode where Barney hires Jason Segel's character, and he says to him like, "Why don't you just change your personality? Isn't that easier?" And like for me, getting comfortable in a new skin at this point would probably be very difficult. Um, but it would be advantageous possibly to change some of my things. I have some rigid schemas. I don't feel they're maladapted. They're supported by my upbringing, my religious beliefs, the social contract I entered, and I want to stay true to my genuine self. Um, I've reached a point of saturation in some things where like they're not rigid in that your unwillingness to be like they mentioned how I'm not flexible in this thing. Some of these things are the reason why I won't change them is because they align with the way it's taught. Like the things in therapeutic alliance and privacy law. There are things that are part of my moral code and ethics that align with the ACA code of ethics and stuff. And I wouldn't change my, perspective because it align, it's standard. It's the standard of care and stuff. So I don't know what they really mean by flexibility. Your unwillingness to be flexible. I'm at their mercy. I asked them for a favor. I disclosed to them that I was going to prison, and I asked them, for their support. I was hoping that these people are professions in the counseling business, and I was hoping that they could be understanding and sympathetic towards my cause, and optimistic that I would return and complete my studies. Um, but they really didn't tell me to change anything. You know, there were some grammatical things. Oh, you didn't cite APA correctly. You forgot to put, the page number for the quotation. You forgot to use the right and. Okay, so I changed those things. The feedback I received there wasn't really, you know, a lot that I would feel falls in the realm of flexibility. Anyway, I'm gonna order some food, maybe some chicken nuggies for Shelby. One thing that's in the back of my mind in my pursuits of these things, I mentioned, that, my advocacy for healthcare was a lifelong pursuit. And I think when I wrote a Facebook post in 2015, there were some friends who potentially viewed my my post as a get rich quick scheme, because one of them, he got me on Skype and he started, I have a friend who's, higher up in a not for profit, and they do very well. They make a lot of money. And that's never been it. I've never been financially motivated. It's always been about quality of care. And like financial things, there are certain financial things like reduction of training and improved pay for doctors. That's part of, like happy doctor, happy patient type thing. The phrase happy wife, happy life type thing. Um, but there are other careers that provide higher pay ceilings with less training that allow for more time for, leisure and familial obligations and whatnot, and allow for more creativity. And I feel that those fields are probably going to be more attractive because healthcare is a very stressful field and it requires a tremendous amount of training and a tremendous amount of debt you take on and time investment. And so I am more interested in quality of care and should I get a quarter pounder with cheese? Growing up, I used to love quarter pounder with cheese. I would get it with no pickle, no onion. And I found that the double quarter pounder with cheese were typically fresher and they were greasier. So, like, you might order quarter pounder with cheese and they might give you one that's been sitting out for like 6 hours. But if you ordered a double quarter pounder, it would typically be, fresher. Um, I really don't order them that much anymore. Um, they're they're kind of like not that they're bad tasting, but they're you gotta be able to stomach it, type thing. It's dense. I think I'll get a Big Mac. I had friends who worked at McDonald's. They gave me the secret to getting a Big Mac for $1 or whatever, or $2. You get a McDouble and ask for the Mac sauce. I worked at Boston Market. Not my first job. I don't know what their first job was. I had also worked at 7-Eleven, and I also worked in a medical office in high school. These were summer jobs. I worked for the United States Postal Service twice for summer jobs while during my undergrad, and I got concerned that I was going to be like typecasted, where like, oh, I see you want to apply to medical school. We see that you're qualified to work in the mailroom, type thing. Shelby, come on down, little girl. I love Shelby more than anyone. Oh, I got tricked again. It's not the McDonald's on. There's a McDonald's on North Ocean. They're open late. There's an Applebee's that's across the street from it. They're open to 12 or 1 o'clock on some nights. I think they changed their hours at one point where they made it like 11 o'clock. Um, but it's always been remarkable that the Burger King across the street from the McDonald's closes around 12 and McDonald's stays open till like 2 a.m., maybe even 3 a.m. Actually, they're open. They're, they might be a 24-hour McDonald's. Like, they might close for like 1 hour because they serve breakfast at 4 a.m. And sometimes I've had orders. I don't like ordering DoorDash, fast food, but um, they might have, I might get, an order at 3:30, and it's like a rush to get it in. Like if they still have the dinner menu at 3:45, they might tell you that they're not serving burgers anymore. You might see order you might place the order in at 3:45 and it'll say arrival 4:15. And then, 4:15 rolls around and it says arrival, 5:57. It just means that it's never coming. Right?